Hi, and this is second part of our series where we talk about design patterns and their practical use in Laravel framework. And in this video, we're going to talk about facade pattern. To be honest, this is one of the most useful, one of the most popular patterns that is being used by many developers. And if you ever used Laravel, I think you for 100% you already use classes that using this pattern. For example, HTTP, facade class, or for example, DB, or any other. But about these classes, we're going to talk later. For now, let's begin. And first of all, first question, what is facade pattern? And here is a nice definition from Refactoring Guru website. It's not advisement, as I mentioned in previous video. It's just fact that Refactoring Guru is one of the best website where you can check how to use design patterns. So facade is a structural design pattern that provides a simplified interface to a library, a framework, or any other complex set of classes. So let's move on to some example, and just imagine that, for example, you installed library for PayPal transactions. Or you can just read this slide and imagine that we have library for emails, but let's just imagine that you installed PayPal transactions library, and you want to send from your application some transactions to some PayPal account, and you don't want to include all this stuff, or any external stuff, a lot of different classes, a lot of different objects, or any other stuff. You just want one thing. You just want to have one class where you will make for example only some simple transactions like a send, or just getting information about transactions. And to resolve this problem and not create any extra dependencies or something like that, we can use facade pattern. And there is a nice example. So just imagine your system like this. So we have file facade, and this is example of using this pattern. One simple class that is where we write all operations that we want to do with some set of classes or with some external library. So in our case, for example, we don't need any extra classes like a permissions class or something like that. We don't want to make our system, our controllers, or any other solutions always import these classes. We just want to have one class that will have write operation for creating new files remotely, or for example for S3 bucket, or for your local storage. And that's the main idea. You just separate all your logic that works with some external library into one class. And now I think it's time for practice. So first, let's see bad example without using facade. So now let's see what we get in the bad example. Better not to follow these practices. I installed library that is named Ligu filesystem. So to install it, just type this command, because if you want to do all practical side of our lesson, just follow this video. And also there will be article below this video where you can also copy all code and just read all stuff that I'm talking about in text format. So first of all, let's see. We import here 3 different classes from this library, and it's already creating a huge dependency in our bad example controller, because I want to have one function to create some file, but imagine that I will need to use this create file in some other controllers, and that means that I always will need to copy all these imports, always define again path adapter, create a new class objects like an adapter, like a file system, and after this do all these operations manually. This is a bad way how to do this stuff. And yeah, let's also import this controller, install all dependencies that we need for this stuff. And yeah, as I mentioned, this is the bad way how to handle some actions with some additional libraries that you use. And to solve this problem, as I mentioned previously, you will need to use facade. So first, let's go here. I have domains, but I think we can create here just a new folder that will be named facades, and let's just call it file facade. And I will show you a solution how to resolve problems like this. So it will be called file facade And now let's import exception first, and now let's define some private variables that will be used in this class. And after this, we will need file system adapter. And yeah, also this local file system adapter, this class use another pattern that is called adapter, but we are going to talk about these patterns in later lessons. So let's create adapter that we will need to our system, and file system class that will perform all actions. So file system, let's call it file system. And after this, we create our first function that will be named create file. Here we type name, here we type content. We can also define types for these variables like a string, but it's not, it's optional for this lesson. But, in my case, I always like to define all types strictly. And before we're gonna write this function, we also need to call here construct, because we will need to define values and objects for our class variables that we just created. In our case, path, it will be storage path, because we want to store all our files in storage folder, and in our case it will be in apps, and there will be automatically created a new folder that will be named files. So we will just define app. Okay, sorry, my button is not working. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, files. Okay, so I defined my this path. Also, I found that I imported not correct local file system adapters, so it should be local file system adapter from Ligu filesystem library. And now let's define adapter. So we will create a new object of local file system adapter, and here we need just type our root directory where we want to make some files operations. In our case, it will be just this path variable. And now it's time to create file system object, because it will perform all operations with files or directories, it doesn't matter. And now we type here new file system, and we define here our adapter, and it will be this adapter. Of course, it can be much easier. We can just copy it like this and just type it here, and it will be the same result. But in my case, I want to define everything in separate variables. Now we can define create file operation, and we will call our file system, and we will type here write. We can define location, sorry, not location, but it should be like a location. For example, if you want to type text, but it will create we will already have here files folder, but it will also create automatically here text folder if we will type here text or any other folder. In our case, let's just type here name, so it will create a file with names that we defined here. And now let's type here content, and also let's define another function that will be called get files list, and we want to get here listing of our files. So now we call our file system again, and I'm typing list contents, and I want to get content of files folder that will have some files. And I can type now here listing item. We can get item path, so item location, and in case if our item is instance of file attributes, so let's import this class. We will type that this is file, and we will type item path, so item path, and another condition, item instance of directory attributes, so directory attributes. We're going to type that this is directory, and again item path. So as you can see, it's pretty simple. We can define here any other functions that will do some operations with this library Ligio fly system. And we can now go to our bad example controller and just rewrite all this stuff. So I don't need all this code anymore, and I can just do everything really simple. So in our case, I can just now use dependency injection. I will type construct and private file facade, and that will be my file facade. I know it's not a really nice name for class, but in our case, let it be like this, because it just says what we do. And for example, if I want to now write some file into my system, I will type here text txt. Of course, we can get some data from request, but in our case, let's just make it simplified. So for example, hello world, just for example. Okay, now let's save it, and as you can see, it's now pretty simple. We just have one class where we do all operations with fly system library. So we don't need any extra stuff, any extra imports. We can do everything just by using this facade. And this is a nice example of using facade pattern, and you can now just define route for this and just try to create and use this facade. It should work. There is another thing that I want to talk with you, and this is internal classes of Laravel that already use this pattern. So for example, if you ever heard about Eliminate, as I remember, it was support facades. So this namespace have a lot of different facades that you can use and that work with different libraries that we have inside Laravel. For example, DB. This, I don't remember which library this facade is using, but this facade is using for direct operations with your with direct SQL operations with your database. So for example, you can execute any queries if you want. If we're talking about HTTP request, we will use HTTP, and it's using it's also using client factory, but internally this class is using Gazelle HTTP library to perform all HTTP requests. So for example, if I want to make a GET request, I can just type GET, and it will be, for example, google.com, and I will get HTTP response for this GET request. So this is just another small example, and I think you already work with all these classes and you know. Or for example, let's see, there was another nice example, Redis. Redis is here. So yeah, let's see. And yeah, it's also using Redis Manager that is working with different with Redis library to do caching or store anything into your Redis storage if you installed it into your application. So it was pretty simple lesson. I hope that you now have understanding how it's working. And also don't forget to check article below this video. If you want to copy all code, or if you want just to read everything in text format, just to remember all this stuff. I hope that this video was helpful for you, and in next lesson we're going to talk about adapter patterns that is really also useful in a lot of cases. So that's all for this video.